What is DDE? Yes, now, good question. When it comes to calling out unconscious bias, DDE is your recipe for success. DDE stands for dispassionate developmental inquiry. Dispassionate developmental inquiry. And what that means is that when you're confronted with unconscious bias or reverse bias, what you must do is call it out. The question is, how do you call it out? And what I'm suggesting is if you come from a place of dispassionate developmental inquiry, you will avoid invoking the kind of defensive fragility that we're used to when we accuse somebody of something which is so heinous. They feel they have to stand up for themselves and come back at us, almost like saying, how dare you accuse me of such a horrible crime? How dare you make such aspersions about my character? So DDE stops that from being an issue because you come from a place of developmental inquiry. So what is developmental inquiry? Well, developmental inquiry is simply saying, for my own development, I'd really like to understand, hence the IDU, I'd really like to understand your criteria for not giving me this job, or for not giving me this glam project, or for choosing someone else instead of me when we're doing exactly the same work. I'd really like to just understand, just for my own development, I'd really like to understand what led to you, or what were the criteria around that glam project. And usually when you come from a place of development, you tend to be dealing with a team leader, a manager, a director, a CEO, a chairman. So when you come from a place of developmental inquiry, you invoke their natural leadership skill, right? Which is development, which is coaching and development. So obviously they're going to respond positively. They're going to take a pastoral approach in terms of developing the person. So they're going to respond. It also bigs them up, so to speak. It's almost like, I need to learn from you. But you've got to come at it from a dispassionate perspective. If you come at it from any other perspective, it's not going to work for you. So you can't bring 400 years of slavery to the table. That's just not going to work for you. You can't bring the suffragette movement to the table. That's not going to work for you either. You can't bring homophobia issues to the table. That won't work either for you. Even if you have every right in the world to bring this baggage to the table, it's not going to help you from a results perspective. So what you need to do is drop the baggage, even though you have every right to have it, and come from a place of developmental inquiry. And let me tell you why you can do that. Because when you're coming from a place of developmental inquiry, you're starting to use your leadership skills. You actually see the bias, unconscious bias or reverse bias. You actually see it coming, and you actually take control of the situation. And taking control of the situation speaks to the leader in you. Sometimes the other side in most cases, the other side doesn't realize they're being biased, be it racial bias, sexual bias, or whatever it is. They don't realize it, but you can see it because you understand the nuances of conditioning, and you can see that they've been conditioned. So what you do is come at it. You make the decision to come at it from dispassionate developmental inquiry. You don't have to. I mean, if you're in the street and somebody annoys you, you might decide that you don't want to. But when you make a decision to come from a place of developmental inquiry, dispassionate developmental inquiry in dealing with bias, you're immediately taking control of the situation, and suddenly you're a leader. And you need to do this as a subject, but you also need to do this as a perpetrator when you're turned into a subject on reverse bias. And if more people could understand this skill, what you're going to find is that it naturally starts to dissipate, reduce unconscious bias in the moment. Because if it happens once and you interrupt the situation, that's going to send a message to the mindset of the person that was a perpetrator. And when it happens again, it's going to send another message. And what that's going to do is make them aware naturally. They're not going to have to read books on fragility in order to be aware of their unconscious bias or reverse bias, as the case may be. Because each time that you interrupt, you call out a bias statement or a bias microaggression, you're reconditioning the mind of the perpetrator. And when you recondition the mind of the perpetrator, they become aware. And the likelihood of this problem happening is significantly reduced. If you had everybody in an organization do that whenever they were confronted with any form of bias, over time, you would rapidly see a diminishing of this as an issue. And this drives productivity. It reduces time off work. It improves people's mental health. It stops drains on HR. You don't need a mediator. You're less likely to need safe spaces that you create for people to speak and empty their bag. All this built up tension, racial tension, sexism tension, ageism tension, and sexualism tension, ableism tension. All of these tensions build up because people don't know how to call it out. But if you can come from a place of, I don't understand, you can almost leave the baggage in the lobby. And this is a choice that you make in the moment. Sometimes it's right to just let it go. But in most cases, if you can call it out without the baggage, what you're going to find is that over time, the baggage is going to disappear because you won't need the baggage. And you'll be in so much control that it'll allow you to expedite the pace at which you drive your career. Your career grows. And I think that's good for everyone.